Hello, and welcome to our Strasz Assessment Systems podcast, Beyond the Test Strasz Talks. I'm Dr. Rory McCorkle, Straz's Vice President of Business Development. We, of course, are a provider of technology systems as well as test delivery in the credentialing space. And I am very excited for our guest today as we restart our podcast series this fall. I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Roy Swift from WorkCred. Roy has been a fearsome advocate for our profession for a number of years. And Roy, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so glad to be here. These types of messages to the community are so important, and thank you for creating them.
But of course, no, it's my pleasure. And of course, you and I have known each other a long time, so it's great to be able to finally have you on here. As I always start these podcasts, liking to hear about individuals' career journeys. So, could you tell me how you ended up working in the testing profession? Because, of course, you've had a couple careers.
Yeah, about four actually, and it all started in the Army Medical Department. I was an occupational therapist working with patients in the hospital, but then I got a master's degree in education, and eventually became the director of the occupational therapy technician program at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, which is in San Antonio, Texas. And we were one of the first to get the occupational therapy program accredited and recognized by the American Occupational Therapy Association. The military had just started looking at that. But with that relationship with the National Association and our involvement with certified occupational therapy assistant, they asked me, well, gee, would you ever want to write questions for the certification exam? And I said, well, I've never done it, but I guess I would do it. And so I had a very terrific experience, and I wish this would happen more often, but they had a contract with Jim Popham at UCLA, Dr. Jim Popham, who was very famous in his approach to writing examination questions for standardized exam. He talked about stimulus attributes and response attributes and what those should be. And I learned so much about what goes into the science and art of writing test questions. And so that experience got me more involved with the association. And then I eventually became chair of the academic accreditation program for the American Occupational Therapy Association, accrediting academic programs at the associate degree level as well as the master's degree level. At that time, now it's doctoral programs. But through that experience, then I was recruited to be the executive director for the National Certification Board for Occupational Therapy. I became the executive director for that, and so I really was immersed into the certification world and writing of assessments, and became involved in ICE activities and ATP activities as an executive director. But it turned out that that wasn't the end of my journey in regard to credentialing. I was recruited by the American National Standards Institute to utilize an international standard, ISO standard, to accredit agencies that say they certify people. And so I thought that sounded interesting. I'd been on the accreditation side of academia. Then I was writing questions for a certification exam, running a certification. So putting those two things together to lead ANSI's accreditation program for certification of people sounded like a good idea. So I did that and created that. But I also created a program to accredit assessment-based certificate programs because, as you know, in this world, even though we may talk about it on a daily basis, people do not understand the difference between the words certification and certificate. And so we needed two standards to be able to say, this is what a certification looks like, this is what an assessment based certificate looks like. And so that became, they're both very successful programs. But then, because I'm getting old, I thought, well, I should retire, of course. And but I also understood the chaos that the credentialing community is in regard to what is a quality credential, what are the different types of credentials, what are the quality associated with those credentials. And so I told the president and CEO of ANSI, gee, I thought there should be an organization that looks at the quality, market value, and effectiveness of workforce credentials. And so thus WorkCred was created. And it because we consult, we had to be a separate entity from ANSI. We could no longer be a division of ANSI, and so we became a 501c3 organization with our own board of directors. And we have people like on the board from Accenture, MIT, Raytheon, various industry people as well as credential people. So that's where I ended up, and that's where I am today, trying to fight these battles of looking at quality.
Well, and what a career arc it has been, and certainly greatly appreciated by a number of people who are in the industry for that tireless work, to say the least. But you've hit upon something that's really critical, and that is that over the last 5 to 6 years, we have seen a real, I would say, tectonic shift in the way in which U.S. states, local entities, and the federal government are playing a role in defining or recognizing, or in some cases, de-recognizing certifications, licenses, and other credentials. Of course, with your work at WorkCred, how do you see these evolving policies really reshaping the way that organizations in the credentialing space need to design, measure, and communicate the value of their credentials?
Well, it's certainly a very changing environment. And a few years ago, if a professional society or an independent certification board or a licensing board said, we created this, industry wanted it, we're good, you believe us, um, people would believe it, you know, because the professional society said that's wanted and we do nothing but good work. The climate is changing. The government, both at the state and federal level, is very concerned that many people are spending their money on credentials that lead to no increase in job offers or getting a job or salary increase or promotions. And so they are inserting themselves more and more in regard to looking at outcomes. Unfortunately, one of the outcomes that seems to be the highest priority for them is wages. And we know that wages is not always it's certainly one of the criteria, but certainly one in which there are many other reasons why a credential is done. And of course, we know in certification, it's also about the protection of the public. It has nothing to do with salary. It's protecting the public against people who cannot articulate and perform their particular occupation or profession in a safe and proficient manner. But there's another element, it's becoming much more complicated, is that the state and federal level is interested not so much in process anymore. We talk about having a quality process, quality job task analysis, all the processes that we talk about. They're more interested in what are the outcomes? What does this credential do for an individual? How does it help the person get a job? Are they able to have less credit card debt? Are they able to own a car or a house or whatever? What is the economic impact of that credential on the individual? And unfortunately, they're trying to make sort of a black and white situation out of this, which I think is going to lead to many, many problems. Because if you don't have a high salary or you don't see immediate promotion in the third party data, and that's another key word I'll talk about, then they're going to say that that isn't a credential of value, and so a lot of good credentials will be hurt because of that. And unfortunately, especially in the certification community, very few people have third party data. Most of it's second party data or data that the certification body has done surveys of their own. They've done wage surveys, they've done impact surveys, all sorts of, but that is not sufficient in the current environment. States and federal government want to make decisions based on third-party databases such as IRS data, census data, Equifax data that talks about what people own or don't own in this regard. So that makes it very, very difficult in the world of what we know credentials, and particularly in the society where we have child care workers, nursing home workers, social services workers who are essential to the economic infrastructure of this country. And actually, if those are not in place, the people who are making the high salaries are not going to have the support they need in order to make that high salary and to keep that job in this regard. So we have to convince the policymakers and the state government people to look at this in a much broader way about how we determine value in credentials. And unfortunately, the AI community sees this as an opportunity to really make money and produce very fast moving undocumented, validated data to reach a lot of conclusions in this regard. So um, it's certainly good that the governments and the policymakers are getting more interested in trying to determine, because we know there are a lot of credentials that have no value and people are paying a lot of money. But it's almost like we've got to swing back to the middle and help people understand what is the various elements that determine quality credentials. And I think our fight is ahead of us.
Well, no, I would completely agree with that, Roy. And I mean, as you know, I've been writing, academic papers and other materials on this subject of value of credentialing for upwards of a decade. So we know this is not a new topic, to say the least, but it's certainly one that has been, an ongoing thorn in the industry's side. Now,
And
it
it's becoming even more important, Roy. Sorry to interrupt,
no, it's okay.
because the people who are creating these indexes, these AI methodologies, have a lot of power with policymakers and government. The certification community has been quiet way too long. We have got to stop talking to ourselves and talk to the policymakers and government and provide convincing arguments that what we have and how we approach it is extremely important to this country. We can no longer be silent. The people are not just going to accept that, hey, you have a certification, that's great. No, that is not acceptable.
No, completely agree with you. And of course, we have seen the impact when we do band together, through organizations like
Yes.
WorkCred, through the PCC. We've seen that our messaging can be heard when we band together and indeed stop talking in an echo chamber. But I want to get back to something that you talked about a moment ago, and that is that third party data, and the impact that has on support and funding. So You mentioned salary data such as data from the IRS. Yeah, can you elaborate a little more just on the types of data that are most impactful to governmental entities, and how organizations can use this to both strengthen their credibility to those entities and also potentially gain access to funding such as the workforce investment boards and such.
Yes. Well, data is the new gold in this country. And, the academic community has been looking at third party data for a long, long time. The National Student Clearinghouse, they collect all data from all the universities, community colleges, mostly on the credit side, but they are also deciding now that they need to collect data on the non credit side because that is becoming such an important arena of helping people reskill and upskill in an environment where that's going to be the major effort. It's not just going to be initially being credentialed into a profession or occupation. It's going to be how you're going to adapt to the change in the one that you're already in. In this regard, and so recognizing that recently, a couple of years ago, WorkCred thought, well, why not put certifications in the National Student Clearinghouse, even though it doesn't fit their original scope? Um, and so it worked okay, and they were very cooperative. But it was like putting a square peg in a round hole in that certifications aren't universities. So, and we have our own data that we collect and do. And so Strata Education Foundation noted what we were trying to do and said, we think it may be best to develop another national data trust. And so that is what they did. They created something called Credlens, which WorkCred is supporting and helping bridge the certification community and other non-degree things to try to build a database that can be complementary to the National Student Clearinghouse so that we can understand successful pathways in this country about how people move in and out of those particular degree or non-degree pathways, because we know that as many people are successful in the non-degree pathway as they are in the degree pathway. And then most of the time it's a combination of those. And certainly the what those particular databases look at is educational data. When were academic credentials obtained, in what manner, in what sequence was it done? Did they get a certification and then they got a degree, or they got a degree and then they got a certification? What are the pathways for the various industries and occupations in this country? Certainly employment data about getting jobs. Do they retain the jobs? Do they get promotions? Kind of thing. Does it enable them to transfer to another industry? Those are the kinds of pieces of information we do not have on our credentials in this country most of the time. Even the academic community has not gone that, but they are under the gun too, because now they have a mandate to look at more like outcomes. And in fact, just because you complete a degree, the many states are saying we're going to pay you minimum for getting people through, which used to be the big deal, completion of degrees, but we'll pay you more if you show us what outcomes you've done to help improve people's lives. And so it's on. They're going to lose a lot of funding if they don't. And the same will be true for the certification licensure community, the assessment based certificate community. If we don't go to outcomes, it's going to be a major issue. It's all about third party data and being able to do it. The salary surveys that people do are fine, but they're more interested, what does the IRS data tell us? Because that's actual what that is. It's not self-reported data. I make 150,000. Oh, you do? Oh, well, we don't know if that was exaggerated or whether you really do make that much money or that, or maybe make more and you don't want to say. These are the issues. It's all about data, improving people's lives, not actually completing the credential.
Well, and again, I mean, I think this is both a interesting challenge given the traditional, let's say, opposition that credentialing organizations have had with regard to data sharing. So I know
Yes,
that's a
absolutely.
impediment that you're trying to overcome. But tell us more about, for organizations who might be listening and maybe listening to this message and saying, okay, well, what do I need to get involved? What does it do to benefit my credentialing organization? Share a little bit more about that if you could.
Sure. Yes, you're absolutely right. For 20 years, we've told them don't give your data to anybody, and in that environment, I think that was probably true. That was important. But with this new environment that we just previously talked about, people are going to lose out if you don't be able to look at outcome data and third party data. But it also means that the certification licensure community really needs to evaluate who's asking for the data. Because we are certainly closely related to Credlins, we think that their approach, where they're allowing the certification body or licensing body to control their data and what is able to be published or not published, what they'll release, what they won't release. Uh, but we think that this may be the important thing because when the states talk about we will fund and give support to credentials of value, they are talking about those where the information will be available, where they can be evaluated in regard to third party data, not the data that the particular organization says that they produced in this regard. I think it is very important that certainly confidentiality and security are the two main things that we hear when we talk about giving your data. And whoever the certification body or looks at and evaluates needs to look at that very, very carefully in regard to what security measures have been done. Are they accredited under ISO 27001, which is a very rigorous security agency? Do they meet the Privacy Acts of California, Europe, various things? Because there's a way, even though these privacy acts, which many times the certification bodies say, oh, we can't do anything because these privacy acts won't let it. No, they will allow it, but it has to be done under certain conditions, and that once these conditions are met, then they can be able to move forward in this regard. So it's looking at the organization of how the stringent and uh, the element is very important because it takes a lot of money and resources, and that's why we have worked with Credlins because they have decided to try to do it right, put the resources into it, which takes a lot of money to do right, but at the same time realizes how it's going to benefit the workforce community to be able to show which credentials really do have a positive on people's lives in this regard.
Well, and of course, I think every credentialing organization, if they have the typical intents of their mission and values, should strive for that kind of identification of value. Roy, just really quickly for those who want to learn more, where do they go? Who do they talk to find out more information?
Certainly they can come to work with, but we're not the only source, of course. And there are various certification bodies who I can refer them to who have already made that jump, who are the early adopters and have said already that even the preliminary data they're starting to receive has been very, very influential. Certainly, Credlands at NAS, the Strada Education Foundation, is another one. I mean, they're certainly biased in how they have approached things, but it is a way of hearing about how they have approached the various elements that's going to be important for someone to make a decision whether they give their data to anybody. And then also, more importantly, and this is so important, the certification community has got to break out and start talking to policymakers and government, because if we don't, we are going to be hurt by it. So, not just taking my word from it from this podcast, but actually going to policymakers and saying, what is it that you're looking for that would help you convince that our credential is someone that a credential that you should support and be able to use? And frankly, there may be some money attached to it. So if students in their particular are individuals who are going after these credentials, they may be able to get scholarships and money and grant money from the state if the state has put them on the credential valued list. Right now, the states have two or three lists, and they're all different. And that is one the states are going to have to be looking at because sometimes the lists are in conflict. And some are associated with federal monies like WIOLA, which is the Career and Technical Education type of money in this regard. But certainly, where the money goes, people who are reaching out for certificate go, because if you're going to get a scholarship or a grant, you're going, well, yeah, I like it and it'll get paid for, so I'll go for that. So, talking also to policymakers in their state or in their local, for that matter, and the federal government is going to be crucial. That's where they need to go. But certainly, far as actual specific actions, certainly work red because we have really taken the lead for this. Credlands, certainly, actually, student National Student Clearinghouse, because they've been in the business for 20 some years with universities. They understand, and of course, then asking your own universities that in your locale, because they have been reporting data for many, many years, and nothing bad has happened to them because of that. I wouldn't say nothing, maybe, but at least nothing disastrous has happened to them for reporting data. They have had reports back that has been helpful, and it's actually a marketing strategy for them to be able to do that. If you have third party data and it says it improves people's lives, that's a real big marketing strategy for you to be able to say, don't believe us. This is what the third party data says that we've had nothing to do with in this regard. So, those would be my suggestions to the credentialing community.
Well, thank you for that. And certainly for those who are watching, we will put in the website addresses for WorkCred as well as CredLens in the post in the description of the video. So you can feel free to click on those to get more information. Well, that said, Roy, before we adjourn, I know a lot of the current environment feels like doom and gloom, and we're doing catch up to such a large extent. But let's look to the future. What do you see the current environment yielding in terms of the landscape for credentialing in that 3 to 5 year time period? I know that's difficult to do, but certainly, what role do you see the current policy, data, and collaboration changes yielding as we see that future shaping up?
I think there's several things. First of all, AI is certainly going to have an impact. How is anybody's question. I know I'm working on the new revision of ISO 17024, the one that's used to accredit certification bodies. And throughout that new standard that's being drafted, it has a lot of requirements that if you're going to use AI, artificial intelligence, that you are transparent about how it's being used and you demonstrate how human oversight has validated what AI has done. Those are the two major principles of that. And certainly there is this chance that AI certainly will make us more efficient, if nothing else, in what we do. I think it's still immature in regard to some of the things that is being tried. I also think there is a push to move to more performance examinations. There's a lot of mistrust about how written exams, and even though there's statistical data, you being a psychometrician certainly understand that. Um, but it is a lot of mistrust in these written exams. They say, well, yeah, they had multiple choice, don't they have any? Or even if you're creative and try to do something on the written exam a little more innovative, that employers are saying, but why can't we do more in performance testing in regard to really validating the skills that people have? And I think that will be pushed by the whole idea, if it ever becomes a trend. I don't think it is a trend at this point, of skill-based hiring. And skill-based hiring is really yearning for more assessments that are performance. And I think I don't know, it's 10 or 15 years ago. Remember the corporations of this country all have all these testing centers where they put people through. You know, it was generally associated with some of the big corporations. But it was about performance and it was about demonstrating, and it was done on a regional basis. It may be that that's one of the things that we may see coming back to, with this whole emphasis that it's about skills. And do you have the skills to do it? And are those skills transferable to other things? And how transferable are they in this regard? And then, of course, I think the future is that there will be more and more emphasis, and there's got to be more and more emphasis in the certification community on the recertification, upskilling, reskilling type. I think that has been an area that has been forgotten. When we talk about continued competency, frankly, I've been thinking that we don't do that as well as we should, that it probably isn't proving continued competency at this point. We need to work on the science associated with that in regard, because that's what people are going to be facing. If they change jobs 5 or 6 times during a career, it is about the reskilling, and people don't want to go back and do a whole new certification. So it may be the micro certifications that are designed for pathways of reskilling and skilling in this regard. So those are the areas that I think is looking at the future, the use of AI, the direction toward performance, and the building toward micro credentials that supports reskilling and skilling.
Well, and I think those are all great points, and certainly ones that are very relevant for both credentialing organizations as well as these collaborations with
Right.
regulatory and governmental
Yeah.
bodies. Roy, I just so appreciate you spending this time with us and with our audience. As I shared earlier, please, for those listening, do take it some time to click on some of the links here that will be in the descriptions of the video or the posts. Learn more about these efforts. Touch base with your governmental relations folks. If you're a member of the PCC, chat in that group about what's going on and how we can all engage and be more, as I described Roy earlier, fearsome advocates for our profession.
Mhm.
Roy, thank you once again. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for the having this time together, and I couldn't emphasize more. The time is now for us to bond together and have a voice as a total group representing the credentialing industry.
I could not agree more. And for those who are watching this and have made it through the podcast, thank you so much for your time as well. During this fall, we will get back to posting these podcasts every 2 weeks. So do be on a lookout for the next episode in 2 weeks' time. And in the meantime, please do gather more information on the current efforts that WorkCred and CredLens, excuse me, are working on. And certainly as well, feel free to contact Roy or I. And we look forward to seeing you during the next podcast. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.